الكريم وصحبه واتباع الحماة الدين القويم سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم اللهم جعلنا دعاة إليك وإلى رسولك اللهم صل على سيدنا وشفيعنا وحبيبنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم. My dear respected brothers and sisters, indeed it's a privilege to continue our session here this evening on Islamic inheritance. One of the topics in which, as Muslims, it is incumbent upon us, it is further that we should learn about inheritance and have a fair view and understanding of how inheritance is applied and carried about whilst we are alive, so that at the point in time of our death, we should have full control of what is taking place. And then what we mean by this is that those who live to look after our affairs will not have to be left with uncertainties, with doubts, with the direction of what to do in terms of where do you stand with the relationship of your wealth, your family, and your position in the grave. Thus far, we have completed a very important part of this topic so far, and in this session, inshallah, the fourth session, we are going to look at a very important part as well, and that part is in relationship to what we have done and where we're going to continue. And I would say, alhamdulillah, we have reached a good distance in terms of the explanation and the continuation of the notes. Now, there are further explanations that have been given, and maybe if you want a copy of this particular note, I have it in the slides that I have, which is different to the notes that was email or WhatsApp to you, right? So I may be able to give you that copy as well later on. Now, let us bear in mind our subject matter and what was done so far. We have talked about a little about life and death and the focus and purpose of it. And we have also spoken from the Quranic perspective on death and what relates to a Muslim when it comes to his dealing and living and his preparation for death, what the Quran tells us that we should do in preparation for death. And amongst the things that the Quran mentioned that we should do is write a will at the point before our death. And that should be maintained as and updated as necessary based on what assets or wealth we have acquired. And that's one of the things we have learned at the very beginning. We also come to the understanding of wealth, that wealth doesn't really belong to us, it belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who provides us with wealth, and is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who is going to give us an accountability for what we have utilized on the wealth that He has blessed us with. And that wealth, what Allah has blessed us with, was our purpose. And if we have not fulfilled that purpose in the way that we ought to, then know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also mentions in the Quran, Surah Al-Kafir, that on that day, Yawma Tus'aluna Yawma Idhin Anin Na'im. On that day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to ask you about those things that you enjoyed and utilized from His wealth. Now, bearing that in mind, let's continue and describe a few more other things that we spoke about in inheritance, and that was, the system of inheritance and how inheritance is looked after, and what will make a will valid and not valid, invalid. And in that respect, we looked at a number of aspects of questions and also the statements and what we've looked and deemed as to what will make a will valid or not valid. Now, we're going to continue a little more on this particular subject area, and not only just talk about the validity of the will, but we want to look at families, and we ended at that point with families, and bearing in mind that families are those who are the real connected relationship that we share. The fact is that the Quran tells us that إِنَّمَا أَمْوَالُكُمْ وَأَوْلَادُكُمْ فِتْنَةٌ وَاللَّهُ عِنْدَهُ حُسْنُ الْمَآبِ وَأَجْرٌ عَظِيمٌ. There are two ayahs in the Quran that mentions in relationship to Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that certainly your wealth and your children, fitnatun, they are a test and a trial for you. Wallahu, and with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, indahu, with Him is ajrun azim, the best of rewards, ajrun azimun. That ayat of Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us of the importance of what we are faced with in this life. Both wealth and children is what we aspire with and work tirelessly day in, night in, We work trying to acquire wealth and trying to put ourselves in a position where we can be comfortable and make our families comfortable. And all of it surrounds wealth. But wealth, is it for that purpose? Is it for that purpose? It is one of the purpose. It is one of the purpose that we ought to look after our relatives. However, at that point as well, we must know that wealth is meant to give us an opportunity to enhance our opportunity in benefiting for the life of the hereafter. And that's why the term we hear about as one, purify your wealth by giving zakat. Zakat is a term that is used as a compulsory sadaqah, a compulsory act of charity that is given to the poor and the needy. So our wealth is also, there's a haq and a right upon our wealth to give in charity. There's also a haq and a right for us to also spend on those things that will benefit us and give us continuous benefit, as we mentioned, sadaqatun jariyah. There's also the haq and the right for us to also take care of our basic personal needs that we ourselves would have, that Allah will provide for us to eat. So sometimes, yes, subhanAllah, we'll make a bigger sacrifice and forego what we need. When I mean what we need, I ain't talking about having some big car or some big comfort for ourselves at the price of our personal family and so on. But we're talking about the needs of basically food and shelter and the basic things that we need to keep ourselves as comfortable as possible in serving the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is also a need that we must fulfill. Apart from that, when we look at the other aspect is, innama amwalukum, your wealth and your family are your test. How do you treat with it? And here the test doesn't mean in relationship just to talk about wealth as a test, but the understanding here is, how do you maneuver a test? You try to do it to the best of your ability to get the best result. And the best result can be only achieved when we apply the laws, the rules, the understanding, what is required for this test, what we must do to accomplish this test. One must study, have the knowledge of what they are getting themselves involved in and what they're supposed to do as a human being, as a Muslim in particular. What is our relationship with our wealth and our children when it comes to inheritance? And here it speaks about knowledge. That test now is having the knowledge of how to treat with our family and our wealth. And one of the occasions we are speaking, not of all four, but we are speaking of one particular point here. That is our wealth and our family in relationship to inheritance. That is of importance. How do we treat our family and with our wealth as well and inheritance? And we have studied so far that it is incumbent for us to make a will, but family is one of the tests for us. How do we relate to our families to acknowledge and to know that they have a right to wealth, they have a right to property that we may have, and by means of inheritance, they are going to be entitled to it. The biggest of the questions that we have asked ourselves last week, and I said, bear it in mind that we must look at what is the real difficulty for us in family life. And that is the point of asking the vexing question. That vexing question is, why do families end up in conflicts? Why do they end up in conflicts and have all of these different types of difficulty in getting a will brought forward and being accepted? And we know that in many, many ways that we see even in our normal Western society, most matters like these reach the court and that we handled by lawyers. And we may understand that a lawyer has to do the legal necessities in doing the transfers and the different aspects of distribution by law. But in relationship of fighting a case of who should get more than the other, or in actually trying to say that which will is valid over the other, who has more power of attorney or who does not have the power of attorney, these are the issues that are questionable. And these are the things that we have to look at and ask ourselves personally before we can even come to the answer. You yourself ponder and think what it is that people would get vexed and why they will fight over property. Why would blood relationships, their own flesh and blood, fight over an estate. And that means the one who would have had a care for or love for, or the one who would have provided for you food, the one who would have provided for you some level of comfort in your life. Why would you want to, at this point in time, cause harm to this individual? Why would you want to take away your wealth from this individual who is your blood relationship? Why would you not want to share? Why would that not be possible? What would cause such actions? And this point of view we have to look at. Why would one want to get engaged or become angry in a situation like this? Let's look at a few points in relationship to this. One of the points for conflict is one that we should all understand. Whenever greed steps in, it takes a very difficult roadway for you and your siblings to settle on a matter of estate when it comes to your parents leaving something behind, as we have as will, as an inheritance. And there the challenge comes because of greed. And that is one of the first things, because we always suspect that that other person, meaning our sibling or brother or sister, wants more than they deserve. And if we feel like that, it means that greed is also affecting us. Even as we would see the other person may, in our eyes, look and understand that they want more, but their relationship to their wealth is telling us a big deal, that greed is also affecting you, because you are also affected by the same thing. The fact is that brothers and sisters in a relationship of inheritance and mirath, we have mentioned in our last session, they can forego their rights if they want and increase the share towards their fellow siblings, or increase the distribution of the 1/3 of the wasiya, the part that the parent had probably left as sadaqah in their benefit for the hereafter. They can even give their portion towards that direction. Now, greed is one of the points. Let's look at what is the other factors that can cause us to have that fight between our brothers and our sisters. Next important point, let's think, if we have an idea, what would you suggest that could cause families to fight, brothers and sisters to fight, if greed is one? The next one is jealousy, hasad. That quality comes in between a family when one of the brothers or the sisters look at the other one being favored, or if it looks as though the other one is favored by the father or the mother or the deceased parent, as the case would have been, and that position gives that individual that point of jealousy, because it said, why that one individual is better than all of us, and jealousy steps in. And if you have jealousy within you, then note that you're not going to have an easy solution to your problem of conflict with your siblings when it comes to the distribution of that estate. Other important point that one must be as what could cause, and we're answering the vexing question, is lack of love. If a person doesn't have the love for one another and they don't really care for one another as they should, and we don't really look at each other's concern and their needs, and we don't show that level of love, that lack of love will lead us to a point where we would want to cause, no consideration, no feelings. And, we would hear this from time to time that brothers and sisters will say, you have no feeling, you have no heart, you have nothing at all in you to even consider that, I'm going through this part in my life and you have, and I do have. And you hear all these type of things. What is the factor there? Lack of love or consideration, and feeling of not being given an opportunity or not being important enough in a family. Sometimes you feel as though, well, I am the black sheep, as we would say, the one who really don't get anything, or nobody looks after me, and I continue to be the one who never been looked after. That individual feeling like that or having that type of mentality notes clearly that individual faces a very big challenge. And that challenge is that you are going to be in a state of bother at whatever is dished out or distributed. And more so, the aspect as well that is more of a concern to us in quarrel and actual disunity within family is the lack of knowledge and taqwa when it comes to the application of the Quran and the Sunnah in our application of inheritance. When we ignore this and we ignore the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then note the outcome for us is going to be very severe. And I'll repeat this hadith once and I'll repeat it again in the next part of this subject matter. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that whoever is rightful to receive inheritance and their share that is prescribed for them by Quran or what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned according to the laws of mirath and inheritance, and they are deserving of inheritance, then it is upon us to actually do what is important for us in terms of having that knowledge. So what is said to us is that it is very important in respect of having knowledge of Quran and Sunnah in inheritance. And the Prophet Rasulullah is saying, if a person denies themselves of inheritance, they deny themselves of inheritance or denies another person in terms of what is the haq and the right of theirs, and that person says, well, I don't want to keep it and go. Keep whatever I want, don't give her nothing, and they walk away. Or near a rightful path, we didn't give the individual what they deserve. Then in that respect, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that if you do not give someone their rightful due of inheritance, note on the day of judgment, Allah would deny you of your rightful deserving portion of paradise. And that is a very scary statement, because being given that question, that statement of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, one who deny themselves of that right, then it very well tells us that we need to be concerned of what share or what portion of wealth we are speaking about here. And that part of wealth that we are speaking about, we are speaking about wealth that is of that nature that which, just give me 1 second there. Right. We are speaking about that wealth that could actually destroy our position hereafter. That wealth which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has entitled that individual to receive, and they do not receive it, then it now becomes a key element for that individual being deprived of paradise. So we should be very careful that we take away from the right of our own siblings, or we take away the right of estate that is due to them from what was left behind without their being given it, or no, that individual forego their right and say, look, I don't want my share, you can keep it. If that is the case, then we know that that is fair enough. But if not, then we have to look at the fact that we should be concerned that if I, on the other hand, take what is not due to me, then be careful of what will be the outcome on the day of judgment. And that is of a big concern when it comes to the relationship that we share, when it comes to the distribution of our wealth. Be mindful that we want paradise. That is what Muslims, we are living for. We pray 5 times a day, we give zakat, we pay and we give charity. But the one thing that is more important than all of these acts of ibadat and all that we will do as well is how we treat with inheritance, and how much do we really show concern in relationship to the laws of inheritance. When that is ignored, then be careful of what the outcome can be for us. Again, preserving family wealth and not leaving your family destitute is a key aim. And now we finish over looking at the aspect of where we would consider what are the vexing questions or the points that a person will look at to identify why families would get involved in feud. Now let's continue and look at what is important as the value of having a will and the relationship that the family should have in distribution of that will. Preserving family wealth and not leaving your family destitute is a key aim of the Sharia. So we can utilize that as an objective. Understand the point that The objective here is to follow and observe the lines of the Sharia. If anything else comes to us, no matter what it is, remember, preserving wealth and not leaving your family destitute is the key aim of the Sharia. The law of Islam is telling us that we should not leave our family in a state of destitute, regardless of who you like amongst them the most, as a father or as a mother or as that individual who has a family. Your job as preparing your estate is to take into consideration the Sharia, and the Sharia mandates us to ensure that our families are aware of our responsibility when it comes to the distribution of our will. So most families in our time lack the Islamic knowledge and the spiritual strength, that taqwa, to uphold and carry out a valid will, an Islamic will, amongst their blood relationship. They lack that, and they will not be mindful enough that they know that this is something that is not their law, it is Allah's law. This is not something that I would have a feeling about, or what I should be considerate in terms of, well, I should look at this in a different view. No, we should look at it from the Sharia point of view. So no matter how I feel about my brother or my sister or whatever it may be, our feelings is far beyond the point of or looking at where Sharia is concerned. Sharia goes above all of these things. So the fight for wealth is seen here and at the time of divorce. This is when you see people fight for wealth. Who has what and what is not theirs. And that is evident in that relationship. When they see people look for money in a relationship, look at 2 points in the life of a Muslim. When it comes to money making a big difference in their existence. If you have a problem and there's divorce, look at how they want to separate the wealth when it comes to that. When there's a problem with death and inheritance comes into existence, see how they deal with it. Look for the warning signs, and this is important. Look for the warning signs that are there and that are there which may cause strife in your family after you are gone. What will cause your family to continue bicker, fight amongst itself, and for years and years, we would see these type of issues. And you know, just as a point of example, you know, just in the environment where we live or and look at the people around us, if you would see that there are properties that people would own and siblings cannot come together to distribute that property because they cannot agree together on how to distribute it. And they will not agree that this person gets more than the other. So they will not even come together to sign off on the distribution. So many wills, even though they are probated and they want to get the legality and the justification on that will, yet after the fact, they may not get the due diligence that is required and consideration by all parties, meaning all the brothers and sisters, to agree for that to move forward. And that is a sign that we have to look for amongst these signs here, that as we are alive, what are we leaving our family with when we gone? What are we leaving them with? Fight, quarrels? What are we leaving them with if we cannot fix the problem before we leave this world? And there we have to look at one, fear to make adjustments in lifestyle by moving around of assets, seeing disparity. Now, this is an important point because sometimes you have a particular child or a member of the family of yours living with you and they're enjoying all the comforts whilst the rest of them are not enjoying that particular comfort. But whose wealth are they really enjoying? And you know, because this particular person might be enjoying that well because of the fact that they're looking after you. And this is normal in our society, a normal practice and custom in most societies, right? That the adults will actually move out of the house and then the rest of them who are younger will stay behind. And this is a normal practice and norm in society. But this doesn't mean that if the others forgive their rights and they say, well, yeah, that is okay, whoever they let take care, I have my life, I good to go. That is all well and good. But if you have a case that doesn't happen now and you tell your children, listen, you're living with me, but this house is mine and I want to share it like this. Then if you take away this right from this individual now, and the fear of adjustment in the lifestyle of this individual. Now, you're telling us, well, I cannot have this house. And we see cases like this, one where younger siblings, because they have that opportunity, now think to themselves, well, this should be what, this should be theirs. But really and truly, they should have that in the right manner being done, so that at least everyone is comfortable amongst the siblings to agree upon that particular distribution when it comes to that point. So don't go and leave this world. SubhanAllah, we don't know where we're going to die, but do not leave this world except that you have settled such a situation amongst your children. 2, rivalry amongst siblings. And rivalry is not just amongst talking about to leave behind. Rivalry is in the point of who amongst themselves will be better off, and they try to have that level of rivalry of, well, I have a better car, or I have better this, or better that, or my job better than you, and they're showing off my son going here, or my daughter doing this, and this type of rivalry, when it comes to even to the point of when it comes to inheritance, some of them, all the rivalry now takes a different position. Now the rivalry is who will get the better portion of what is left behind. So be careful that you put your children through this level of rivalry. And we're bringing up these points here before even talking about preparing a will. Because if you cannot observe these things and sort these things out, preparing the will and having the will is not going to resolve the issues that you leave behind when you are gone. In other words, you have to bring your family to the level of mentality and the thinking and the taqwa and the piety, that spiritual and Islamic knowledge that is going to remove these types of things. So late marriage as well, a young woman and an old man, a young woman seeing an opportunity takes that advantage to themselves. They say, all right, well, this old man here, he had this all by himself here. She totally ignores all his children and whoever he have there and say, all right, well, this time now, I can get this house, I can get this car, I can do this and I can do that, and I'll have so much. No, all well and good. But if you feel that this woman is comforting me and giving me all these benefits, and my children don't look for me, and I could tell her we have cases like that to deal with, they don't care about me, this lady taking care of all my needs. Subhanallah. Well then, think again. Think of what is the outcome and the opportunities that this person wants. If it is really you that this person really have that love and concern for, or they are looking at your timeline and how long again they feel they expect you to live before they can grab hold of all that you have. And when you are preparing yourself and think you're living with this person, then you are going to really find yourselves in a position that is questioning. And when I say questioning, we should also be very concerned of what that means. Is that sometimes we put ourselves in a position like that and we say, we're not going to give this young person, I just want this person to live with me. But we're telling this young person, this young woman, listen, when I die, you have to leave this house because everything here is not for you. This is my family and other members who are entitled to inherit. Now that could put a different downpour on the relationship. If that happens, then you know something is definitely wrong. This person was really after something else. And it can also mean as well that you really have no consideration for this woman. You just want her as a servant or something to look after your basic needs. And that is also wrong. So we as an individual have to understand that both sides of the coin, that if we are involved in this type of relationship, make it clear to this individual that you have to distribute according like this. However, I can give you this portion of wealth, or I can give this to you. But remember that these things are done in that manner. And inform your children likewise that this is how you intend to distribute, regardless that you're not looking after you, regardless that they don't come and check for you, regardless that your children are not part of your total everyday life or connected to every life. Your responsibility as the individual, the father, the parent in this case, your job is to ensure that no matter what your children will look at, you just make sure and clarify these things to them so that they don't come up and we have seen in cases where on the day of the funeral, what people would say about those young women in that particular situation. Right? It comes live onto us and in open and embarrassing situations as well at the day of your funeral. So if that happens, you know what they expect further along. If that happens on the day of the funeral, what more to come after that? A next important aspect that we have to be considerate of and preparing before we leave this world is elder abuse of power of attorney. And the elder here means an elder sibling. Just automatically, because you got the position of being the elder individual in the home, and you grew up with this condition that people put that level of trust in you and the level of responsibility in you, and you think to yourself, well, I have control over everything, and sometimes the elder brother or the elder sister think that I have the right to make the decisions. I have the right and the power to do what I want, and the power for it should be me because I am the elder individual. And sometimes it can be vice versa, as you mentioned in that case earlier, we talk about where we had the adjustment in lifestyle, where the younger individual have been in that case. But in this case, the elder abuse, where the bigger one feels now that they have power, they have the right of say, and they're the ones who have control all the while, and they should be given that authority to take care of all the needs of everyone when it comes to looking after the assets that is left behind. This is also wrong, and no one should ever be left with this particular feeling amongst your family members, be it an elder, be it a youngster, amongst your children, the eldest or the youngest. None of them have that power in any respect, and any one of them, even if they're not even the youngest or the eldest, in between, wherever they might be in the family, we have to note that our responsibility is to ensure that the Sharia and the law of inheritance is done and fulfilled according to what the Quran says to us. Now, at the end, if we do not get it right, at the end, if we do not get it right, the lawyers, at the end, the lawyers get most of the wealth, and families remain in bitterness to the end of their life in this world, and will have to face accountability in the next for not fulfilling the command of Allah. This is more important. Not just getting nothing, not that the lawyer go with all the money, because sometimes cases like these last years and years, families fight over issues and properties and wealth, and it goes on for years and years, and so much. I will take a bigger lawyer and a better lawyer than everybody fighting for the lawyer and giving the lawyer all the money over the property, and sometimes all of this money goes, and when it goes, then you end up with nothing. So the best thing is to come to a solution before you even reach that point where you have to take a lawyer to fight a case on a particular wealth that you and your family could have enjoyed. Rather, the lawyers are enjoying the benefits out of what you leave behind. And this type of difficulty and challenges is where you and I as Muslims must be concerned about. That these things that set strife and cause problem in our family, before we leave this world, look to address these issues. And there may be many more issues than these. These are just a few of them that one must consider where it comes to us looking at an issue amongst these and telling ourselves, well, I can't deal with them. I can't deal with them at all. I just leave everything and go my way. No. If as a father or a mother, you are in that position and you are knowing to yourself that, I have reached an age now that I have to make sure and fix these problems, because I don't want on the day of judgment that I be held accountable for this situation with my family when I leave this world. And therefore, we should prepare that will and avoid the headache later on. Avoid that headache, because that headache is not the headache I'm talking about in this life while you're alive. The headache is when you reach in the grave and you leave behind like this. And every day that you are in that grave, instead of you getting du'as of khair and goodness and barakah, you're leaving yourselves in that grave, receiving the anger of your children, the curse from your children, the curse from your relatives who are due to receive, the curse from your wife, the curse from your children, and the curse of the people around you that you leave behind and did not solve your problem. And that, to me, is more of an importance, and that headache we are speaking about is what you don't want later in life. Later in life means the next life, not this life. So therefore, it is prudent that you take the right step and move forward. So do not put ourselves in a position that we want to be like that. Now, considering these things, we should also consider what is important within ourselves and our wealth. Now, what I mean is, I say some of our relationship with our wealth and our family, as a point from all these things that we are looking here as the challenges we have, what is the reasoning that we have a fear within ourselves to distribute our wealth, and the fear for these things is that sometimes the sense of intertwining between ourselves and our wealth and those who are near us, it is so entwined within our relationship that we find it difficult to untwine it. In other words, we tie up ourselves in all types of things, all types of things. And now when it's time to distribute or leave a will, we can't do that because then people go know all the business. You know, when a father or a mother reach a stage in life and they have all these things, and you know, now it's time to clear yourself to leave this world, clear your assets, get tax clearance, as we would say. Give yourself clearance from all your affairs of this world. You didn't declare everything before. And now your family got to realize all of the other things. And one example I'll give you, for example, if a man, and this is not to create any kind of, you know, vexes really, but for people to understand, the fact is that a husband, a man, he might have a relationship, a wife on the outside, he never tell his wife about, and his children about, and he has a legitimate blood child from a relationship outside there, right? And now it's time to write a will. But how could he put a will and have this situation outside there and do it while he's alive? The only time he could probably do this is when he's dead, because if he do it while he's alive, he will probably end up dead. So we have to understand here that this situation is very not tricky, I would say, but very confrontational if we have things hidden aside and we don't want to bring it to light. So it will come to light. For example, sometimes parents will have a business and they take loans on this business, or they sell out the business to someone else or some partner in the business, or they have people working within the business and they hand over the business to them and say, look, we take the business, just give us this amount of money, or give us this amount of continue living our life in comfortable situations as we want to live on the face of the earth. And at the point of that, we're supposed to put this on our will that, you know, we no longer have the business, and sometimes our children and our relatives thinking in their mind that this business still existing. And this is our business. When we die, we're taking over this business from our parents and we're going to help them move forward with this business. They're looking forward to business, but they're not only to realize that they have no business in this entire relationship, no business to get anything out of it. So we have to be careful about that and be considerate, because amongst the 5 points I mentioned, I said these are other points that I can also relate to and let you understand clearly that we can't leave them out and think to ourselves that we, in our time, in this modern world, you know, we live in a situation where things are not the same like long ago, a few little things you have. But things are so complicated today with plastic and monies and credit cards and all different types of things. So we have to be careful on how we deal and treat with our finances and our distribution of our will, and in particular with our family members. Now, we continue on page 8. So after looking at that, so this is just one of the joints you should be look at. They're fighting for sweetie, but it's more than sweetie fighting for these days. What happens to your property if you die? Now, everybody waiting for something on the end of the journey for you, but without a will, what really goes on? And those who are alive knows what goes on. As we are all called upon not to tarry, not to delay in drawing out a will, we must instruct, encourage our family members, friends, and relatives to devote themselves to religious obligations. And this is something we understand. Here, religious obligations refer to making sure that our family, we are doing it to death, we have to encourage them to be practicing deen. Don't just leave them on their own, because that is one of the things we'll be accountable for on the day of judgment. Propagate the knowledge and values of Islam to them. let them have this value, because these are the people you're leaving behind. They have to be doing things that will benefit you whilst you have gone, and then you want your wealth to benefit you too. So you don't want your children, you're giving them property, you're leaving them with something, and they don't even understand what to do with it. So they squander it, or they spend it on things that have no value to benefit you or them in the next life. Therefore, knowledge and the values of Islam, and to give up or devote our life, wealth, time, and competence for the ultimate success in the hereafter, paradise. This is the objective that we should strive with. This is what we have to tell our family members, that they have to strive, that they have to make the effort and strive to work towards the hereafter, continue striving towards the hereafter to fulfill and benefit out of what they are given inheritance, what we are leaving them behind. So don't just leave them with wealth, but leave them with the knowledge of how to utilize wealth. Leave them to understand the value of what is wealth. Leave them to understand that the purpose of their life is the hereafter, that the objective is to aim to earn paradise. And as well, with all of that, that knowledge and obligation is to also pass on the instructions whilst we are alive and leave it behind in our will. So don't just tell them that you expect this money to go like this according to the Quran, Sunnah, and this and that. No. Say to them in your will that you declare and you profess that you have conveyed the message of Islam to them. And let them confirm that you have conveyed that message to them. Because on the day of judgment, you don't want them to stand before Allah and say that you, as the father or the mother, did not convey that message. You want them to actually confirm that to you, so you don't have to take that burden with you. And in that light, we also have to have the knowledge and the understanding as well that the parent, you are educating your children, that you are giving them an opportunity to become some worth for themselves to earn paradise. And if you set the example, you're also giving them an opportunity so that they grow older, they will have an opportunity to set that example for their families, their children, and by extension, the Muslim community will have a better understanding of how to treat with wealth. But today, wealth has dominated our lives in the different forms. That is, we look for comforts and ease in everything rather than understanding the full success of our knowledge on understanding and treating with one aspect, as you mentioned tonight, family and wealth in relationship to inheritance. How to focus that towards the paradise. How to focus that towards the paradise. And that means that we must teach our family. So when a Muslim dies, now we're moving on to the other part that is very important to us. We have to note that in relationship to when a person dies, there are 4 duties which need to be performed. And this is not talking about the funeral, talking about the inheritance aspect of it. All right? And that is 1. They are 1, pay the funeral and burial expenses. So we're talking about things that will affect our will. And before even going further into it, we should also look at what it is in respect to our will. Now, this is an Islamic perspective. We should also know that there are also the general Western laws that we live in countries like ours and parts of the world like India and so on, which we'll discuss later on when it comes to that type of things in terms of inheritance and will, how it is done. But per se, in relationship to a Muslim, when a Muslim dies, consider these factors in the preparation for the individual who have gone and what they leave behind. So therefore, there are 1, pay the funeral and pay burial expenses. From where? There are some of the conditions that one must look at, and that is, for example, when you look at paying the funeral and burial expenses, it refers to a number of things. Now, what is the funeral and burial expenses? Today, when you consider funeral and burial expenses, some people might think of having, in our modern society, sometimes you look at having weeknights and preparing food and doing all type of things. I want to take out these things from the expense of the inheritance, the wealth that is left behind by the person. That is not part of our will. That is not part of the duty that you are supposed to do. In other words, if any additional is done like these things as expenses, it's not really necessary that you should take it from the person's wealth. If, however, the person leaves this and says, you know, whatever you might have to do to get me buried, you can utilize from it. Not that he's trying to instruct you to follow a particular ritual, right? A particular ritual. Because janaza, shrouding, janaza, that is the essence of what a Muslim burial is. In other words, he does the ghusl, the kafan, the wearing of the clothes for the deceased, mayat, and the burial. Whatever that cost is, that is all that is needed. Everything else is just cosmetics. It is things that is added on. So paying the debts of the deceased. And this is the next factor that must be considered before we actually look at doing anything with the person's will. Paying the debt of the deceased. That debt is such that we have to know, and in other words, the deceased before this position, I see, preparing a will is so important because the Prophet ﷺ had mentioned to us, and I've mentioned this in last session, a person dying and leaving this world without the preparation of a will, such an individual, subhanallah, if that person dies and leaves this world and does not clear off his debts, then his position between here and paradise remains suspended until someone clears the debt. And you know, interestingly, whilst we are family and we look at inheritance and we look at what we leave for children, sometimes there are situations that, you know, when it comes to debt, that as I mentioned before, people prepare loans that are already covered by insurance that cover a person dying. There are no worries, the debt is covered immediately. So all those types of debts and so on are also within that situation. However, if that happens, then the accountability is not between you and that individual. In other words, you can't say, well, no, well, it's haram, you know, to first to go and pay the bank. My belief as his son is different to my father. My father take out a loan and he pay in his bank and he have interest. I'm not going to pay no interest and no debt for nobody like that because that's something haram to deal with. So in other terms now, is that permissible or not for a person to do that? And on the other hand as well, a person leaving money in the bank, they look at the other side and the man collecting interest in this account. You know, they look at the interest now, but looking at the interest to pay, not the interest to receive on the total account. In other words, if this money corrupts the entire asset of the person, this person never removed the interest, and how many years he probably have interest. Who knows how much the account of interest is in all of this money if he has not cleared all of these things. A person never probably pays zakat on his money, and he have all that money in savings in his account. What happens then? Debts are very complicated in our time. In other words, in the past, in the time of the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, things were very simple. Not as it is today in our society, because there are many hidden circumstances and situations that may not be able to just untwine itself for us to get an easy grip on it and solve it. So we have to be very careful in our preparation of our will, and the deceased, the relatives that are left behind to look after this affair must be conscious and aware of what it comes to that. So determine now the value, the value of the will of the deceased, which can only be a maximum of 1/3 of the property. And this is the other point that one must bear in mind, that 1/3 of the wealth is given as wasiyah, your opportunity to give a sadaqatun jariyah to benefit you for the hereafter, and whatever those causes are, individuals may be, whoever they may be, whatever it may be. That is their maximum, so that must also be in consideration. We can't just wipe out and say, all this we only have no given, no place, nothing at all. We cannot do that because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, has given the allowance for that 1/3. Distribute the remainder of the estate and property to the relatives of the deceased according to the Sharia law. And that is important. Who gets and what portion of the wealth they get. In respect to this, let's consider a few factors before we move forward a little more again. All right, and that is, for example, You give wealth to your children and you prepare your will, and you have your relatives with you and you have everything going well. But it comes to the point now that when you pay off the debts and you clear up all of those things, you get to realize that you have no money to distribute. In fact, you have to sell the property that you have to pay off the debt of the person. Is that possible? That would you allow yourself to say, well, we'll ignore the debt? I never know my father owed you money. He dead, go and ask for it. You know, that is sometimes how we leave the situation. If you want your money, go and let them pay for it. Let them give you the money for it. What he leave here is just for we are nothing, and if we give up this, we have nothing to get. And this is how serious the situation becomes. Because if you get to realize that the only house that you and your siblings have to share is the house that your father mortgaged from some partner down the road, and he died now, and you have to pay up the money, and the house got to go, or otherwise, and you all say, well, your father made this, he made this proposition before, and he made this to collect this money to do this, and when he get it back, he would have paid me, otherwise he put the house as the security, and this person comes to collect this property now. What do? You say, well, my father dead, that is it, that money dead. Here, for us, is a challenge, because usually the Prophet ﷺ and his companions would have asked, in the presence of the mayit, is the mayit owing anyone anything of debt? Anyone is being owed by the mayit, let us know up front. And the Prophet ﷺ, as an act of dislike, if there is debt and it's not paid, the Prophet ﷺ did not like the idea of doing janazah for that individual because of the fear of what the accountability is like. Now, on respect to that as well, is that the Sahabas used to come forward and help clear the debts of the individual because they want this individual to be free and clear of debts before entering into the grave. And therefore, we must, as family members, take a note of that, is that if there are debts and we come to the distribution of the property and we ignore it, note that what haste is done, the haste is taken before burial, before the burial of the deceased. And we sometimes wait for years to settle the debts of people, right, if our families have a situation. No, I'm not saying that if a debt is brought forward and you acknowledge that this was a valid case and you do your investigation and you say, well, yes, well, I know my father already bring this money, but I didn't know where he get it from. If that was the case, and you could validate those type of things, then it's upon you now to take the right of that challenge and fulfill that amanat of your deceased relatives. You can't give up the house because you are living in it and this was left for you all and you are the siblings and you are entitled to it. And you say, listen, well, we can negotiate. Even though he said that, we will pay back the debt so we can hold on to our property if that is okay. And then if not, if you want to acknowledge that, so we can go. If not, you want to totally disassociate it, well, then different things can happen. Sometimes that same person is sleeping at night and you hear the next morning the house burned down. Because all type of crazy things happen when people don't actually fulfill their rights and obligations in a relationship. So, before I go further in what is recommended here, I just want to read the last paragraph before we close this evening, inshallah. We must consider the following preparing a will. Remember, our debt and our desire is to stand on the day of judgment free from sins. Therefore, we consider the words of Allah in the Holy Quran. Establish salah in both ends of the day and night. Indeed, the good deeds remove evil deeds. That is the small sins. Surah Hud, Surah 11, verse 114. And I mentioned this here, we should also make tawbah, repentance of major sins. Ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu narrates that we used to recite with the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam in our gathering 100 times, Rabbi gfirli wa tub alayya innaka anta tawwabul ghafur. O Lord, forgive me, relent towards me. Indeed, you are relenting and forgiving. Why mention this? A person knowingly that we are going to die and leave this world, no matter what age or what time it must be in our lives. One of the things that we have to safeguard is our ibadat, our worship. So in the preparation of our will, we must consider our prayer. Have we prayed all our salah in our lifetime? If we haven't done this, then we should make effort to fulfill this. And if not being able to fulfill, we should put some portion of our sadaqah towards helping to expiate our shortcomings in our ibadat. Nonetheless, don't sit back and say, well, I have enough money to pay for my salah. We can't pay for salah, but we have to make the effort continuously every day and every night in ibadat to do the qada of our salah, the qada of our sawm, our fasting. And if we have the ability and the wealth that we should have performed Hajj, we should fulfill the rites of Hajj, or if not, send or deploy someone to perform that Hajj before our death if we are unable to go for that Hajj ourselves. These considerations will be held accountable on the day of judgment if not considered and implemented whilst we are alive. So we therefore look at our deeds and ensure that we tell ourselves that we must fix our deeds. So much so, ulamas and scholars have mentioned to us that an individual must take into consideration that their ibadat is far superior. So the first thing that a person will be accounted for on the day of resurrection will be his prayer, his salah, and therefore ensure that our salah, ensure that our prayer is totally fulfilled. And the ulama ikram mentioned that we should make effort even at the time of tahajjud prayer. We should be doing qada if we have so much of qada to do. That time which is so sacred and recommended as being valuable, at least we just do 2 rakat of tahajjud prayer and the rest should be qada salah, if we have qada to this extent to fulfill. And every day with the obligation prayer, the fard salah, after every fard salah, we should do some level of qada for prayer that was missed, continuously to make up for the years that were missed. And if not, as I mentioned, if we die before that, we should have some place within our will for our children and those that inherit to make sure that they fulfill the wasiyah in respect to us paying some level of sadaqah in the expiation of our shortcomings in our ibadah and worship. Any questions? Before we close, we have a few minutes.